4th, and we're going to call the Planning and Zoning Commission to order, and if the administrator would call roll.
Chairperson Begelman.
Here.
Dane. French. Gritters. Hagensick.
Here.
User.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Vice Chair Payne.
Here.
And Solheim.
Here.
Thank you. We've got a pretty heavy agenda tonight. It's before you. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor say yes. Yes. Those opposed, no. And the agenda is approved as presented. The minutes of the December 7, 2017 meeting were available to you. Are there any additions, corrections? And if not, do we hear a motion to approve?
Motion approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the minutes of the December meeting are approved. Ben, any communications?
No Board of Adjustment for the month of January, and that's all I have.
Okay. Just a reminder to the commissioners, please speak into your microphones. I had the opportunity to listen to a city council meeting, and it gets pretty bad out there if we don't speak directly into these, so, okay. First item, public hearing on rezoning request from M1 Light Industrial District to C2 Commercial District, and to amend the future land use plan from public government to commercial for .32 acres of former city right-of-way on the southwest corner of 4th Street Southwest and Technology Place. Tim Bradford, applicant, and City of Waverly owner are requesting a zoning change for the property currently in the city right-of-way from M1 Light Industrial to C2 General Commercial. The property is located on the southwest corner of the intersection of 4th Street Southwest and Technology Place. The proposed rezoning will match the C2 permitted land uses south of the intersection. The area in question is currently city right-of-way that is no longer needed. The city was approached to sell and dedicate a portion of the right-of-way for future commercial development expansion. The future land use plan calls this area out for public governmental usage, reflecting the current drainage way use. Plans call for a future parcel to have a drainage easement established and potential parking lot expansion and landscaping the area immediately adjacent to Technology Place. Public notice was given to those within 250 feet of the subject property, and publicity advertised in the local Waverly newspaper. Ben, any comments from you before we open the public hearing?
I just wanted to clarify the location for everybody here and everybody that might be interested in this. So we're actually at the southwest corner of 4th Street Southwest and Technology Place. So there is a chunk of land that is owned by the city of Waverly that frankly I believe was extra right-of-way that was acquired because of potential roadway alignment and also for drainage considerations. In a review of that, we understand and recognize that that is pretty excessive and rather large. So therefore, staff is entertaining the request from the south property owner to allow them to purchase a portion of that and to essentially expand the parking lot area and to create a separate entranceway or share an existing access point onto Technology Place and access the property, and we will not permit another access point. They will have to share the one currently in front of that former daycare center. That's all I have,
Okay.
just for clarification.
Before we open the public hearing, any comments or questions of Ben from the commission? Our ground rules on public hearing are simple. We try to give each speaker about 5 minutes to present. At that time, we will stop the presentation and allow other people to come up again with 5 minutes. And the people who want additional time can in fact get back in the queue and come up again. With that, we're going to open the public hearing, and is there anyone that wants to speak to this particular item? Seeing none, hearing none, we will close the public hearing and have a discussion with the commission. Then this is on the result of the realignment, these Technology Place and what's the other street? Anyway, the one across on the east were not, they were not aligned before. And so there was some shifting around, which netted this particular piece.
That's right. And so essentially, like I said earlier, that it's essentially excessive, frankly, right away that's open grassy area that was meant to carry some drainage. However, the drainage can be accommodated with some minor adjustments. Property owner, I think their intent is to expand their usage, and they will accommodate that. There'll be an easement established and so forth. But for these purposes, the leftover parcel was zoned M1 light industrial. So this is a formality to essentially rezone it to match the south existing commercial property to afford it any privileges of the C2 area.
Okay, sounds like good housekeeping. Okay. Comments?
Will the industrial park sign stay?
I'm not sure on that, to be completely honest. That'll be discussed as part of the actual project.
Yeah, this has always been, that street didn't get changed. It was the other side of the street that got changed. This street was the same as it always was.
It looks like the sign is outside of that platted area. In
And
that,
I think you're referring to the site survey
yeah.
that was included, yeah. I believe they identified it outside of the area. Now, keep in mind, there is the existing area which it falls within. They did a dashed line to show you how much is existing, and then what they're doing is showing you a hard line where they're placing pins with those little open circles. Those are new pins that are placed to show you the adjusted boundary line. So we're going to essentially give that area to them, parcel AA, and so the sign will be outside of that area. So the question is, will the sign remain or not? My hunch is yes. I don't know if it'll be moved or not, but my hunch is it'll remain.
I didn't know if they'd asked, or anything on that regard, so.
Other questions, comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
So moved.
And I think for the benefit of the public, Dave,
You
if
did.
you'd be kind enough to read it.
Sure, you'd ask for that, wouldn't you? I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezoning request from M1 to C2 and to amend the
Future land use plan?
future land use plan from public and governmental to commercial for property on the southwest corner of the 4th Street Southwest and Technology Place as described in the supplied legal description to the City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. Those in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Those opposed, say no. And the motion is carried. Go to the second public hearing. It's a public hearing on amendment to the Centennial Oaks subdivision plan development density of housing, providing for one additional detached single-family home located on the north side of 29th Avenue Southwest, approximately 800 feet west of 11th Street Southeast, and to amend the future land use plan from semi-public to residential. Prairie Links Real Estate LLC is requesting to amend the recorded Centennial Oaks subdivision plan development by providing for one single-family detached home lot. The lot is sought to be created and labeled as parcel QQ and consists of approximately 1.35 acres on the north side of 29th Avenue Southwest. The lot would be sought to be accessed directly off 29th Avenue Southwest. Track B is sought to be created to dedicate to the city for future and current infrastructure considerations. The future land use map calls this area out to be semi-public use and would need to be amended. So, again, before we open the public hearing, Ben, anything on this property?
I'm just going to show you guys just a quick sketch of, because it is part of a plan development amendment. If you recall, we recently redid that in 2017. We went through that ordinance that we currently have and we adjusted it and amended it so that we could get a little more clarification on when something like this comes up. When you're increasing the density of housing, even if it's by one house where there was none planned in the initial plan development, which is the golf course, it is said to be brought forward. And so you see before you, and you guys got a packet of information that shows you this image here, which shows you 29th Avenue, or because it's in the county on the southern part, it's called 240th Street, but it's actually 29th Avenue Southeast in the city limits, the farthest extent of the south city limits. So we're proposing a house and a potential future addition to that house and a potential detached garage. You're going to have a circular drive access at 2 points along 29th Avenue. You also will have a tract B, which is encompassed here, which generally from the center line measures about 63 feet to the north. That would be tract B, and everything north of that, this triangular area, would be privately owned potentially and set aside for a single-family residence. So this is going to be to the west of the existing platted, I believe it's called Breezy Hill subdivision. There's 5 lots. So there is a sanitary sewer line available to service this property. There is water on the south side of 29th Avenue Southeast with Central Iowa Water. They will supply the water to this area. The city does not have any water mains in this area. And so we have talked with the applicants about the formalities of providing services to the property. We're still working through those, but at this point, they're asking for permission to be able to amend the plan development with this proposal to show any potential adverse impacts to the surrounding property. So as staff, we're supportive of the request. We don't see any substantial harm with the request. We find that services are adequate to provide to this property. And so because of this, we're going to recommend approval of this as it is proposed.
For the commission, any questions of Ben at this time?
I guess my only question would be, or maybe for future ones like this, we only have a couple of planned developments, but it's hard to picture this compared to the rest of the planned development.
Okay.
So if maybe for future ones, we could have that as follow-up. We don't see them very often.
Sure.
That would be great.
Okay, we're going to open then the public hearing. Again, same ground rules. And is anyone in the audience care to speak to this question? Seeing none, hearing none, we're going to close the public hearing. Discussion with the commission.
There's no discussion. I'll go ahead and get the motion on the
Please.
table. I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the planned development district for Centennial Oaks to include for a 1.45 acre property to be utilized for one detached single-family home with Tract B to be dedicated to the city, and to amend the future land use plan from semi-public to residential per supplied site plan and legal description to the city council.
And I will add one thing to that resolution, to be dedicated to the city. I understand that at this point, there might be some negotiations happening, so I would request that that be removed from the motion.
Okay, that's fine.
We hear a second?
Second?
Okay, we have a second, motion and a second. Any further discussion? With the removal of the language that we indicated, those in favor of the motion indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. The motion is carried. Let's go to item number 3. Public hearing on a special provisional use request for ground solar panel array at 901 16th Avenue Southwest, located on Lot 1A in the Waverly Industrial Plaza, replat of lots 9 and 10. Waverly Utilities is requesting to install a solar panel array on a 3.27 acre property owned by the city of Waverly in southwest Waverly. The area is generally described as property on the south side of 16th Avenue Southwest, located approximately 300 feet west of 8th Street Southwest. The request entails the erection of a solar panel array with approximately 1,700 fixed tilt array solar panels. The Waverly City Code Section 100.28 requires ground solar panels to be reviewed and recommended on by the Planning Commission prior to being considered for approval by the City Council. Again, before we open the public hearing, any quick questions for Ben at this time?
And I just wanted to quickly add, is everybody familiar with the location then? It's actually directly on the east side of the existing railway, which abuts our Waverly Industrial Park Plaza, which actually is the terminus of Technology Place and 8th Street Southwest, behind the current FS AgVantage building, just for clarification. So there's really no built roadway back there, but it is platted right-of-way. I thought they'd point that out to everybody, so everybody knows where that is.
Very good.
So the orange roof, is that Ag Advantage?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, we're going to open the public hearing, and if anyone in the audience would like to speak to this, please come forward, give your name, and let's move ahead. Anyone? I've got to tell you, these are the quietest public hearings we've had in a long time. Okay, hearing none, we will close the public hearing and discussion between the members of the commission. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the special provisional use request for the erection of solar panels as shown on the provided site plan to the Planning and Zoning Commission to the City Council.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And this motion is carried. Let's move to, hold on a second. Yep. Regular business. Review and recommend on minor subdivision plat for parcel AA located on the southwest corner of 4th Street Southwest and Technology Place in Southwest Waverly. Tim Bradford, applicant and the City of Waverly owner, are requesting the approval of requested plat for parcel AA, which is adjacent and replat of the city right-of-way of Technology Place. This is the companion request to the rezoning request to provide for additional commercial development. Plans call for a future parcel to have a drainage easement established and potential parking lot expansion and landscaping the area immediately adjacent to Technology Place. The proposed plat includes provisions for a 20-foot wide drainage easement. Questions for Ben?
I'll just do
Or
one.
comments from Ben?
Well, I'll just do one point of clarification. It's actually Bill Bradford was requesting this of the city. I know I printed off initially Tim Bradford. I know Tim. It came out as Tim Bradford when I was typing it, even though it's Bill Bradford who's requesting it. Just thought I'd clarify that.
We'll make the correction.
So is there any reason why the 20-foot wide drainage easement could be inadequate, or does it seem very reasonable? And
Yeah, that seems very reasonable to accommodate that type of application.
Okay. Any others?
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the minor plat providing for parcel AA and proposed drainage easement as shown in the provided plat of survey dated November 27th, 2017.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the motion is carried. Item C2, review and recommend on minor subdivision plat for parcel QQ in Tract B located on the north side of 29th Avenue Southwest, approximately 800 feet west of 11th Street Southeast. Prairie Links Real Estate LLC is requesting a minor subdivision plat to create a 1.35 acre single-family residential lot on the north side of 29th Avenue Southwest. This is a companion request to the Plan Development Amendment to provide for one additional home adjacent to the Prairie Links Golf Course development. The lot would be sought to be accessed directly off 29th Avenue Southwest. The resulting Track B will be created with this minor plat and will be dedicated to the city of Waverly so as to provide for additional right-of-way to encompass existing and future public infrastructure. Water service can be provided by Central Iowa Water Company, and sanitary sewer service can be provided by the city of Waverly. Questions for Ben, or Ben, comments?
Again, I put the language in initially dedicated to the city. That's not finalized at this point. So I want to remove that.
Okay.
And essentially, I'm just providing you an image of the actual plat of survey that was done, which we're calling a minor plat. Again, it's a companion of what you already saw earlier in the agenda, where we were requesting to amend the plan development with what they were showing. Now you're seeing the actual plat of survey that we're calling a minor plat that would show the two tracks, because the center line of the road to the property line is actually an easement in the county. We're remedying that, and we're matching up with the existing Tract A northernmost boundary on the east side there with the request for the Tract B. So they're legally describing that, and also parcel QQ.
So is there anything significant about removing the dedicated to the city language?
As far as being significant, all we're trying to say is Tract B and parcel QQ will be created. Then the question is, will it be dedicated to the city now or later? That's a question to be determined now, or later, excuse me, during discussions.
Okay, now
It's
or
a
later, but eventually it is?
Yeah, eventually it'll be negotiated. We just don't know where those negotiations are. We haven't formally sat down to discuss it.
But that's fully intended.
Yes, that's intended to discuss that, yes.
Does that dedication involve a cost?
Well, again, we're just talking transfer of land. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
So, none of our business?
I don't think so, but
Well, it's two different plats you're approving, so whatever happens, that's really, all we're doing is approving the plats, so.
Right.
Whatever comes with the negotiations of how those are transferred and what the cost or no cost or whatever isn't anything to do with us. We're just approving two plats, or, yeah, two plats.
yeah, that's helpful.
Yep, that's correct.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the minor subdivision plat providing for parcel QQ and Tract B as shown on the provided minor subdivision plat dated January 4th, 2018 to the City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And this motion is carried. We're up to 3, aren't we? Okay.
Moving
We're
along.
ripping right through 'em.
Keep up the good work.
Review and recommend on minor subdivision plat for parcel AA and parcel Z located on the southeast corner of First Street Southeast and First Avenue Southeast in Southeast Waverly. Waverly Historic Lofts LLC applicant and Harold Ricks, am I pronouncing that correctly? Harold Ricks Surveying are proposing to adjust the lot lines between the common property lines and an alley in between them in the 100 block of First Street Southeast. This is being done as part of the Waverly Historic Lost Project, where the former CUNA commercial building will be converted into apartments. Questions for Ben? Or comments from Ben?
So what we're looking to do is essentially clarify for the project, we're going to move the lot boundary, we're going to adjust it, which will include a part of an alley in the city of Waverly. So you see the plat in front of you. So essentially what we're doing is moving the line to accommodate a building proposal and development proposal. That being said, are there any questions? And maybe Bill can add something if he has something.
So this is part of the CUNA building renovation. In order to do the project, they're supposed to have a contiguous parcel to include all of their parking within the parcel itself. They can't cross a right-of-way. And so we worked with the adjacent owner, the funeral home, and talked with them about this. There are no public utilities going through that alley, and there's really no reason to make it a public alley as such that would be maintained by the city. So what we did was we talked with them about the what would be the west half of that alley. The CUNA building developers they will own both sides of the alley. So when they do that, they will use that for parking, that strip of land for parking. So they're going to maintain that driveway or the alley as a ingress egress, and then on the other side, the funeral home wants to maintain the use of that because they actually have another drive that goes on their property, so it's kind of a loop. So they would maintain the east half of the alley. These two parties will be entering into a cross agreement that allows them both to maintain their respective halves of the alley. And it actually will look like it does now, but it will be maintained by two private parties as opposed to the city. The city would vacate that land and then convey those parcels to those respective parties. We think this is the best way to accomplish this. And basically, they'll keep the ingress-egress agreement so that the people that go to the funeral home can go all the way across the alley. The people that are living at the CUNA building can go all the way across the alley. And their maintenance will be provided privately instead of by the city. Right now, that's a difficult alley to work with. And there's really no reason when the private parties really own the whole block for the city to be involved in that process. And this facilitates then using that strip of land for parking for the CUNA building to qualify for their grant money for that project, for that renovation project. What they did was they actually just platted the land that is owned by the CUNA developers, the Cohen Esri people with the Waverly lofts, and they have another LLC that's on the parcel AA. There's no platting being done with the remaining property. What we will do is have ask the city council to vacate and convey to the funeral home the south half of that alley on the east side. So that'll be a separate thing that'll be done with the city council. We brought this to you to have the parcel designations and the parcel divisions approved and recommended to the council.
Thank you, Bill. Questions?
Hop in there and do it. Get your name on the books.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the minor plat providing the parcel AA and parcel Z as shown on the provided plat of survey dated December 28th, 2017.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those who are in favor of the motion indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And this motion is carried. Let's move to number 4. Review and recommend on zoning ordinance amendment to C1, zoning district, amending district language. City staff is requesting the commission to review and recommend action to the council on the request to amend the city code section 100.12 C-1 neighborhood commercial district to better reflect the location of service-oriented businesses to be located within this area, in addition to schools and churches with special provisional use consideration. This is an item that we've spent many, many months debating, chatting about, and getting into it. Let's see where we are. Ben, we can call on you.
Sure. I think Bill can chime in and help me out. We worked on this, Bill and I did, and Bill helped me with the wordsmithing, trying to capture some of the comments that were received at the past couple Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. We took those all into account, and I relayed a lot of that to Bill, and he reviewed the minutes and rehashed it with me a little bit about the conversations. So I kind of walked you through in my memo there, generally the process that we're doing. Basically, in a nutshell, we wanted to eliminate any retail or restaurant-type uses that may have been allowed by, definition set by words such as variety stores, delicatessens, things like that, because we recognize today they're just gigantic and usually require high traffic volume for their business model to work. So what I've done is, for the memo, I gave you some C1 typical uses. I just kind of labeled them, showed you some pictures from around town of what we would consider a C1 use, what would be a C2 use. You can kind of see that. Basically, your C1 uses are going to be the dentist offices we have in town. Your restaurant uses would be your C2. You can kind of just look through those. If you have any questions, let me know. But generally, I just try to highlight some that we imagined as C1 and C2. And again, the C1 ordinance changes, and I don't know, Bill, if you want to chime in here.
Sure. One of the things that I heard from Ben was that you had concerns about putting in the idea of the high-volume traffic definition and the deliveries and the operation hours in that last section, which made it sound like we were restricting these. And what we're really trying to do is show what the intent of this district is and kind of describe what the intent is. So when you look at the intent, we added that this district may be located near residential areas and should not include high-traffic volume businesses which require frequent deliveries by tractor-trailers and that operate between the hours of 10 and 6. I think I told Ben that I think we should add one more word there, that operate generally between the hours of 10 and 6. We're not going to say that somebody can't operate during those hours. It's just kind of a good example of something that you don't want an all-night type of business that would be, would have noise, would have lights, would have vehicles, would have trucks. So we're really trying to just describe what we mean by the permitted uses within the next section. And it really was, we struggled with how to get across as many examples or as many ideas of how you can describe what we mean by C1. And I still feel like one of the big problems we're having in the difference between C1 and C2, as we perceive it, is that delivery issue that has come up in a particular area, which is generally got C1 businesses, but it's got one with a C2 component in the middle of it. And that's one of the biggest problems with that particular place is the delivery method. Other than that, it's probably pretty close to a C1 anyway. It's just the warehouse takes deliveries from semi-trucks, which then causes traffic issues and those kinds of things. So we are trying to get away from generally businesses that would have high-volume deliveries and would be operating in late at night, early in the morning, which would be disturbing to the residential areas next door. I mean, I would still take some ideas about how we could better describe this, but we try to come up with some descriptive things that would give you that idea that you know what C1 is. It's that doctor's office or that dentist's office or that chiropractor, and it's not going to be a retail big box store, or it's not going to be a restaurant that runs until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. So I don't know what you think about how we've changed that, because that's the change we really made, was from that last section to bring that into the intent rather than look like it's a requirement or a prohibition, which is not what we intended to do.
And the one thing, too, that came up during our last discussion was size. I mean, the limitation of all buildings allowed in C1 are limited to 2,000 square feet. We didn't think that was appropriate, and that was discussed pretty thoroughly. There was, some discussion about, well, maybe we should keep it in to, show the intent of keeping things small, but the reality is, if it meets all the other intent criteria, generally speaking, and the examples we give, it should fit. So we're not too concerned with removing that.
There was some discussion in past gatherings about the amount of space between the rear of the building and the property line. How do you feel we are now?
Well, I called our building inspector on that, and I understand they're still kind of double checking some of their, criteria. But generally speaking, the criteria we have in place should be sufficient. It's in place in other communities, so we're confident that that'll work. And again, we're asking, I believe, for 15 feet in the rear. We changed that from 25 down to 15 with the rationale of you're probably going to have dumpsters and minor garbage trucks going around that, imagining on the backside to collect garbage. Other than that, you're not going to have parking generally in the back.
Isn't this one of those situations where the word generally applies to just about everything we're attempting to do here? I mean, we're going to have that mindset to make this work. I think the special provisional use is in that spirit, that there are going to be some things we can't name today, but they'll fit that category so that they can be debated. What are some of your thoughts?
You used examples out there, security bank and then the dental office, but then you've got the warehouse that sits right in the middle of that, because you got on the other side, you got a chiropractic office, so it kind of defeats what you're trying to accomplish.
But particularly if
That's
that's
where
our
the generally
problem here.
comes into the,
If this would have been a C1, then they could have had their retail store, but the warehouse that was served by a tractor trailer would not have been permitted because that was a use beyond what we expect in a C1.
but if we go in and change some of these like we've done in the past, then you're gonna have one sitting in the middle of that, where we've gone in and done some changes on,
But they'd be grandfathered in, so we can't
I know,
change them.
yeah.
I mean, it's just really for future
I
development.
know, I
future
understand,
use.
it just, you stop and think about it, we had that argument when it was first platted out there, why they wanted, what was that, R4,
R4.
yeah, they were very adamant about doing that.
And R4 was the catch-all, remember, that we've tried to
Oh, I know,
eliminate.
I know.
So that we don't have R4.
I don't like,
meaning
I don't like
apartments,
using generally
houses.
acceptable for most things, because then all of a sudden you're back into that catch-all,
Yep.
So remind me again, going east on the Cedar River Parkway, that's currently zoned agricultural, is that right?
How far east?
Well, that's my question.
Well,
maybe.
are you talking about the open land up to the
Yeah.
rail trail and so
Yep.
forth? Yeah, a lot of that's agriculturally zoned, yes.
And so that would potentially be areas that where the C1 or C2 would apply.
They would have to ask, they could do a zoning like that. They could say C1 or C2.
And the thing with that is they would come forth to this body and make a request, and then we would evaluate with the future land use plan, and you would have to hear some testimony. We would, invite neighbors within 250 feet, property owners. You would evaluate all of that. So, but I would argue fronting onto a roadway such as that, I think would be appropriate, especially if on the other side is light density residential, a few homes here and there. I think that would be appropriate for what it's worth.
But see, I think the developer can say, I want a C1 district. I want to keep it a C1 district. I don't want to stick the Culvers in the middle of the C1 district or the fast food place. And so they can choose to what businesses they want to solicit for their development. And that's what we want them to come forward with, is say, here's my road, here's my lots, this is what I want to solicit for this area.
So if I recall our discussion last month, Rich was talking about, well, if you're a developer, you probably want to keep as many options open as possible, so you'd want to do all C2. So does this help us?
But if you pick C2 and you approve it, then you get what you've basically, what they've asked for, because the C2 would allow them to do heavy retail
Right.
and big box and all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
because that's our catch-all C2 commercial district. So if that's approved, then you get that. If you do a C1, then you have some control on that and people can enforce that.
And one thing I'll add is, you have C1 a little more clarified now, whereas before it was, you could do this or that, but nobody chose it kind of for that reason. Why do that when I could do C2? What we've done is created essentially, I would argue, kind of a fallback for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider when somebody comes forth with a C2, to say, hey, I've got this great idea for this area here, I want it to be C2. And in evaluating it, it may not pass the benchmarks of what, because of proximity, immediate proximity to a residential development, let's say, and it may not make sense. Therefore, the P and Z Commission could recommend, well, maybe C1 would make more sense than C2, therefore we're going to recommend denial. You know, that's why, again, our intent is to create something that gives you a benchmark, essentially. If it's too dense, you're kind of going to hear it and know about it. If it's just right, you're probably going to recommend approval, if that makes sense. Does that help?
That helped.
And that's what Heidi was arguing for when we were talking to Casey's, you know, or not, I should say arguing, but you were suggesting.
Sure.
Right. I think this has a lot of potential for us to have something. I know I would feel more comfortable in an area that already was fairly well settled for housing, going this direction than saying, okay, yeah, let's do C2, and it could be somebody that has 500 cars that come up to it every day. I think that's harder to feel that it's right to say yes to things like that.
And it's still either C1 or C2 is in our land use plan, so I mean, it's.
Yeah, we say commercial.
Say it's C2 or C1, I mean, that could be a kind of an interesting
Well,
meeting, but.
Yeah, because, I mean, unfortunately, that's part of the process, is that's why you hear the merits of why something ought to be a C2, or why it should be a C1, or ought to be a C1. Do you follow? I mean, so I think everybody's getting the gist of that.
And when we do the land use plan again in 3 or 4 years, when we do the full rewrite, we can talk about whether we want to have the different districts be identified, whether it be C1 or C2, in those areas where, right now, we just have it commercial. And what does that mean? It could mean C1 or C2, or C3. I guess the C3 is a different, but it's similar to that.
That's gonna be the important part of it, because when you got a developer, they're gonna, just like you said, Rich would like to see too, because you want to have as many options as you possibly can. And so that land use plan is gonna be the key that, you know, that'll have to be decided, you know.
Sure, but there's a lot of business parks that, I mean, if you look at development in Cedar Falls, there's areas where it's just an office park. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. This is kind of an office park type of zone. And if they want to have an office park, they don't want the other things in it. So that developer would say, I don't want the C2 uses. I want the C1 office park uses. And that's what they want to develop. Otherwise, they won't attract the office park they want to have. So we're just giving a district option to these developers. We're not telling them what to do. We're saying, this is your option to use for that kind of a development.
If they don't like them, then go to a PUD and have an option of C1, C2, and that PUD.
Right.
And that's what your alternative is if.
And the PUD, though, has to be has to be a planned out thing now that we've changed that.
Made the changes, but it
Right.
can be easily done, you know, and that's how they would accomplish it if they didn't like what the land use plan was. So.
I feel like what we have here is much more clear and useful than what it has been in the past. I think that was our goal with looking at this, was to make it something that was useful and helpful for maybe future plans or needs that we have.
If you do vote on, if you plan on voting on this tonight, I would like to add the word generally before that operate generally between the hours of 10 and 6, because there's times when you may have an office setting that would have some hours late that would not be the same kind of hours.
I can imagine that.
Yep, that would make sense.
Whoever is the mover, if you'd kindly put that word in there, and therefore it would fly. Or not.
I move that the commission recommend approval of the ordinance amendments to section 100.2, the C1 Neighborhood Commercial District, as outlined in the attachment provided by city staff to the city council, but adding the word generally to, let's see, it'd be 100.12.01, paragraph 2, for businesses that operate generally between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6. 10 p.
Right.
It's written backwards.
It's written backwards, 10 a.m. and 6
They don't
p.m.
operate then, though.
Well, we
I
don't
thought
want
that
them
too.
operating.
Should
Sorry.
not
It's a
operate
double
then.
negative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a double negative, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry. That was my fault, I think, in the sentence structure.
Because we say should not be.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we have the sense of it? About a second.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Kate. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the motion is carried. That's a good piece of work that goes back how many months?
At least
I
two, maybe
appreciate the
three.
feedback too, because it really helped us kind of formulate it into something that we think will be a really good piece. It'll be a really good district, I think, for people to use for those areas where they want to keep an office park type setting.
Very good.
And you've just got one minor little typo there under the second paragraph for special provisional uses shall be subject to all the requirements.
Under which one, again?
Second paragraph under provisional uses, special provisional uses. Following uses and structures shall be subject to all the requirements. of-
Oh, the word "to" is absent.
Right.
Good catch.
We can usually make those kind of typo corrections.
Okay. Any old business? Do we have any new business?
I move that we adjourn.
We are adjourned.